There we go. Happy Groundhog's Day, everyone. Did your robot see your shadow? Their shadow today? 6 more weeks of build season. That would be nice. I'd take that. Need some more time. All right. Welcome, everybody. Tonight's topic is going to be more talk about changes coming to this season. Last week, we talked about bumpers and the significant update to robot construction rules related to bumpers. And this week, Yoji is offered to lead our discussion tonight on alliance selection and advancement to champs, and I believe we're also talking about advancement to state and whatever else new changes we want to bring up with the conversation. So, Yoji, the floor is yours. Please take it away.
All right, thank you, Scott. I'm going to share my screen here. I've got some slides that I want to share with you. Does that work for everybody? Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. Just as a quick introduction, I'm Yoji Shimizu. I started as a parent in FRC, then mentor, now volunteer. I've been a master of ceremonies at events here locally, as well as at championships for a number of years. And so I wanted to kind of go over some pretty significant changes in the event structure or the event experience this coming year. One focused on alliance selection and changes there. The other about advancement to championship and this new points model that's being introduced, and we're transitioning into that this coming season. And anything else that people have questions about with regard to the event experience, it would be great to have that discussion. So again, thank you for being here, and feel free to kind of ask questions or put things in the chat as we kind of go along here. So I want to just quickly introduce you to a new award at the events this year, and then we'll get into sort of the discussion about this new alliance selection process. And we've been given very specific instructions as MCs about language and the way in which we kind of do the process. And I want to be sure that you are all kind of familiar with this before you get to the event, so there aren't any surprises for anyone. Because I know this is a really important and also can be a pretty stressful part of the event experience for students who are involved in the alliance selection process. And we'll talk about qualifying for championships in 2025 and the new regional advancement points model, and then quickly talk to you about the way in which teams will qualify for the Minnesota State High School League Championship in 2025. All right, so first of all, there is a new award. This is called the Rising All-Star Award. And this is the description, this is the award that celebrates the team that has persisted through challenges, despite the difficulties of being young. And this could be the result of being a new team or a team with recent turnover in membership. So I think the Rookie Inspiration Award is no longer with us. There is the Rookie All-Star Award still, but this again is an award that kind of recognizes potentially younger teams, but also takes into account sort of other challenges that teams, regardless of their age, have been able to overcome in their experience in FRC. So just a heads up about this new award. Let's see. So let's go into the alliance selection process and maybe talk quickly about why these changes are being made. So I really don't think this has been a major issue at events in Minnesota and North Dakota, but this has been a significant issue at championship, where the time it takes for teams to select their alliances has been getting longer and longer and longer over the years. And this past year, I think, was sort of like almost like the breaking point. There was at least one division at championships where the alliance selection process took like an hour and 15 minutes. And there were significant also other challenges that students experienced during that alliance selection process, which everybody felt needed to be addressed. And so really a task force was formed to kind of think about another way to kind of do this process, where the top 8 teams will be selecting 2 teams as partners to play in the playoff tournaments at events. So these were the goals of the process. One goal was to make the time period between the end of qualification matches and the end of alliance selection 35 minutes or less, roughly speaking. And that's in general what the average time for alliance selection has been over the past couple of years. Provide a consistent alliance selection experience across events, empower student representatives to make informed and efficient selections, and then to reduce the real and perceived pressure that is placed on student representatives. So those are the goals for the changes, and kind of keep those in mind as you kind of think, as you kind of listen to kind of what's going to be done. Another thing that's important for you to know is you should be aware of the key volunteers that are involved in the Alliance selection process, because all of these volunteers are involved in some aspect of the Alliance selection process. And I think it's also important for students to understand that all of these key volunteers are there to make the Alliance selection process work well for you as a student team representative. So if you have questions about the process, you're not sure about things, these are the individuals to really kind of ask. We'll help you through that, and we'll make sure that the Alliance selection process works well for you as a team and a team representative. So one is the lead queuer. Generally, the lead queuer is the person that kind of wrangles all the teams together and makes sure that all the team reps are kind of ready to go. The lead queuer will also have a new role this coming year, which we'll get to in a minute. The master of ceremonies and the game announcer are kind of the people that are on the field, kind of coordinating and organizing the Alliance selection process as it happens. We'll talk about their roles. And then the FTA this year will also be involved in the Alliance selection process in terms of being essentially the arbiter of whether a team has been able to make their team selection within the allotted time period. And the scorekeeper is also the one kind of keeping track of the scores and making sure that up on the board, the teams when they're selected are put in the appropriate places and those kinds of things. So that's important as well for this process to occur efficiently. All right, so if you need details about Alliance selection, it's in the game manual in section 10.6.1, and there were a couple of updates as well that were related to Alliance selection. Okay, so this is the first big change. So instead of one student representative per team, each team is now allowed up to 3 representatives. Okay, so those teams may send either 1 student, 2 students, or 3 students, or 2 students and 1 adult, right? Those are the combinations that you can choose from in terms of who you would like to be on the floor representing your team during Alliance selection. Now, if you have more than 1 student as a team representative, you will have to designate 1 student as the Alliance captain. So that's important to remember as well. If you think about who you're going to bring down, make sure you know ahead of time who the Alliance captain is going to be, and it has to be a student. It cannot be an adult. So that's important. And then the way this process works, only the student Alliance captain can invite a team to join their Alliance, right? So the student Alliance captain can have help, assistance with the other students and the adult potentially on their team, but only the student Alliance captain can actually announce who they would like to invite to join their Alliance, right? So that's one big change. The other is there's going to be a timer between the end of qualification matches and the beginning of Alliance selection, and that's going to be 8 minutes. So we will make multiple announcements, and you hear this at events all the time. Please make sure you have your team representative report to the lead queuer so they can get Alliance selection going and make sure that happens. But essentially, I think what's going to happen this year is when that timer goes off, Alliance selection will begin, even if all the teams aren't down on the field ready to go. So it's really important for you to remember that there is this timer, this 8-minute time period between the end of qualification matches and the beginning of Alliance selection, and be ready to be down there, ready to go. During this 8-minute time period, this Alliance selection video will be playing, right? So in the past, the Alliance selection started, and then we introduced the Alliance selection video, but now we're being told, play the Alliance selection video before this 8 minutes is up, right? So that's the other important thing to remember. It's, again, trying to be a little bit more efficient. And I hope you can hear this, but I thought it would be helpful to just kind of play the video so you kind of know what this is about as well. So let's see if this works.
The top 8 teams move into the team captain positions of the playoff alliances. The number 1 team can select any team at the event to join their alliance. If the selected team declines the invitation, then another team is chosen until one accepts. Suppose Alliance 2 selects Alliance 4, but Alliance 4 declines, and Alliance 2 selects another team, which accepts. It's now Alliance 3's turn, but the same rule applies. Alliance 4 is not available, so Alliance 3 has to select another team from the available pool. And the next alliance can select any available team that hasn't declined an invitation. This process continues through Alliance 8. Notice that a previously unavailable team has become an alliance captain. At this point, any remaining team that has declined an invitation is not eligible to participate in the playoffs because they can't be selected. Alliance 8 now picks their third team member from the remaining available teams. Alliance 7 picks their third team member, and so on, all the way back to the number 1 alliance. All alliances are now full, so alliance selection is complete. But the next several teams need to be prepared to serve as backup teams if one of the selected teams can no longer compete. Listen for an announcement for how many teams will be asked to serve as backups. And be sure to let the head referee know if your team accepts that responsibility. Let's start our alliance selection.
All right, so that's the process. There essentially is no change in the actual alliance selection process. So that's just important to kind of note. The video kind of clearly explains kind of how the alliance selection process works. All right, what is different this year is that this is the field from a top-down view, and you can see where we are going to line up the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth alliances, all 8 alliances on the field, right? The master of ceremonies, or the MC, is going to have a central position, which is shown here on this graphic, and the MC is actually not going to be moving much during the alliance selection process. So the MC is not going to be roaming around the field talking to each of the different alliances. It's going to be up to the alliance captain to kind of come from their spot and go to the MC to make their announcement about who they would like to select, right? So the other thing that's new this year is we're introducing the teams from number one to number 8. So we're not introducing all of the teams at one time. We're going to start with the number 1 alliance. We're going to bring them out. We're going to announce them. They're going to come out onto the field. They will take their position at their spot on the field, this number 1 position. And that's the way we'll get it started. So we'll start with number 1, and then we'll go to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so there won't be the shuffling that happens when an alliance picks another alliance captain. We're just going to start with that number 1 alliance. Right. Okay, the other big difference here is there are time limits for your picking. So in that first round, for your first pick, you have 45 seconds to make your selection or to announce your selection. And then the second round, it will be 1 minute and 30 seconds, 90 seconds, right? And the pick timer will be displayed on the field timers that you see at the ends of the field by the driver station walls. So that's how you can see how much time that you have left. All right, so there are a couple of time limit rules here. So the timer will start when the MC finishes asking the team to make their selection and stops when the team makes a valid selection. So that's the 45-second window. If a team makes an invalid selection, such as picking a team that isn't at the event or is already a member of another alliance, the timer keeps going until you make a valid selection, right? And teams making a good faith effort when the clock hits 0 will be allowed to finish their pick, right? In the game manual, there are a couple of examples of what's a good faith effort and what's not a good faith effort, right? So examples of a good faith effort would be the alliance captain, the student alliance captain, walking towards the MC when the clock hits 0, and then announcing the team that they'd like to invite. Starting to state a team as the clock hits 0 would be a good faith effort as well, right? Examples that are not a good faith effort that were in the game manual are, for example, continuing to talk with your alliance partners without making any movement towards the MC when the time hits 0. Also, talking into the microphone for more than approximately 30 seconds is what it says in the game manual without clearly stating a team number to invite. So if you're kind of trying to run out the clock or delay things, so for example, I could imagine a team mentioning all these sponsors as a way to kind of continue to kind of provide additional time for the team to make a selection. So this is around the 30-second mark where it will be perceived as like your time is up and you need to make a selection. Now, the individual or the volunteer that makes the call about whether this is a good faith effort or not is actually the FTA. So that's the role of the FTA in alliance selection, right? So the clock hits 0 and there's a sense that it's really not, the team hasn't really made this effort to kind of make their announcement, then that's when the FTA will come in and say, we're going to need to move on. All right, so just be aware of that. All right. So the way this is going to work is the MC will announce the team. For example, the number one alliance, the team reps, and 1, 2, or 3 individuals are going to be directed to their spot on the field. And then this is the language that you will hear from the MC when the team is ready to when we're ready to go. So Alliance 1, you are now on the clock. When you're ready, let me know who you'd like to select. As soon as the MC is done saying that, the timer starts, 45 seconds, right? So within that 45 seconds, the Student Alliance captain will actually go to the MC, will physically walk over to the MC, who's in the middle of the field, and announce that first selection into the microphone, right? Just the Student Alliance captain. The other representatives, if there are other representatives, do not need to move. They just stay in their spot on the field, right? So once that announcement is done, the representatives from the selected team will go to the MC and the Student Alliance captain, and they will announce whether they're accepting the invitation or whether they were going to decline or form their own alliance, right? So once the team accepts, then all of those individuals go back to their place on the field, right? So just that's the way the process kind of works. The thing that is going to be a little challenging this year is there's that big truss in the center of the field, and I believe it's not high enough actually for teams necessarily to be able to move from, say, that blue alliance section to the red alliance part of the field where the MC currently is. So we'll have to see when we get to the event, but my guess is the MC is probably going to move from the red side over to the blue side for alliances 3, 4, 5, and 6, just to make it safer for everybody who's involved in this process. All right. Okay, so if a team declines, then you get another 45 seconds, right? So that's the way that's set up. If a team doesn't make a valid selection before time expires, they are actually skipped. And then we come back to the team in order after the next valid pick by another alliance, right? So for example, if number 1 doesn't make a selection in time, a valid selection in time, we move to number 2. The number 2 alliance makes the selection. It's a valid selection. There's an acceptance. Then we go back to number 1 and ask them to make their pick. And they need to make that pick immediately. So there's no timer, there's no time involved there. So you have to be ready to make that pick if you are skipped. And if the team doesn't make a valid selection before time expires in the final pick of each round, they're automatically assigned the highest ranked unpicked team. So for example, let's say you were the number 6 alliance and you didn't make a pick after 7 selected, and you didn't make a pick after that selection, and we move to number 8. Number 8 makes a selection. You're the last pick left, and you don't get a say in who you get as an alliance partner. It'll just be the next highest ranked unpicked team. Okay, so those are the rules there. Ben.
Yeah, so if number 1 doesn't pick somebody and then it's number 2's turn, can number 2 pick number 1?
No, they cannot. I don't believe they can. Yeah. Any other questions there? Okay. Yeah, Scott.
Is there, and I don't know, because I've never been part of alliance selection before, can you ask the MC who's the next highest available team?
Yes, you can. There will also be a graphic on the scoreboard that will show the teams and their rank order.
Sure, that makes sense, yeah.
So you can see that there, but certainly you can ask the MC. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. There was also a question about, I think one of the reasons this is being done is to kind of minimize, what we've been seeing in the past, which is phone communication or text communication between someone in the stands and someone on the field. Hopefully having additional team representatives will kind of minimize that. But there is no rule that I can see that prevents someone from continuing to do that if they'd like to. It's just within that 45-second period that you need to make that decision. So again, if you want to talk to somebody, somewhere else that's not on the field, I believe it's still okay to do that. But we're hoping that doesn't happen as often with multiple team reps on the field, right? So after that first round, there's actually a 2-minute break. And again, this is where the number 8 alliance will select a team, and then they will have to come back after 2 minutes and select their second alliance partner, right? So again, same deal. We're going to start with the number 8 alliance. The timer will start. It's now 90 seconds for this second round. And again, when the alliance is ready to make that selection, the student alliance captain walks to the MC to announce the pick, all right? And again, via select or decline. And then all of those individuals will go back to their spot on the field, right? So you can see this is potentially going to be quite crowded. You could potentially have 3 representatives for each team, 3 teams per alliance. That's 9 people in an alliance on the field. With 8 alliances, could be 72 people potentially on the field. So there's going to be a lot of there are going to be a lot of people on the field that you should just kind of be aware of. Plus, at events that we typically have, it's typically 54 teams that are kind of at an event. So again, you multiply that by 2 or 3 people per team, there'll be about 150 people kind of around the field as part of the alliance selection process. My other understanding, at least in the Minnesota events, is that we are going to have some kind of placard or sign that the team will have with their team number that will be distributed to them before alliance selection begins, so that we can find you, so that everybody can find the different teams with those numbers. So that's another thing to just kind of be on the lookout for. All right, once that's done, all the 8 alliances have been selected. The backup teams, up to 8, I think, typically. These backup teams will actually report to the lead queuer, and these are the top 8 unselected teams, and they need to go to the lead queuer after alliance selection is done, and they need to indicate their intention to serve as a backup team during the playoffs, right? So I think that kind of sets up all the kind of aspects of alliance selection. So David.
So actually just kind of going back to round 1, if you're team 8 and you don't make your selection within the 45 minutes because you're now 2 minutes and then going to team 1, what's the action that happens there? Do they just delay it, or?
If you are the number 8 alliance, as I read the rules, if you're the number 8 alliance and that first pick and you don't make a valid selection within that 45 seconds, you're the final pick in that round. So essentially, you are going to be assigned the highest ranked unpicked team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So just a heads up there, because that's my understanding. That's the number 8 alliance has the final pick in that first round, typically. And so they would, if they don't make a valid selection, they get assigned essentially the highest ranked unpicked team. Right? And then they have another 2 minutes during that break to figure out who they'd like to select to complete their alliance. Right? Dominic, I think you were next.
Do you anticipate the cages being under the barges? Because I just feel like that could, hit your shin on the cages could be really painful.
Yeah, that's my concern, and I really don't know whether the cages will be there during alliance selection. So I think really what we're going to do is we're going to have the MC move when it's moved from the appropriate side, so that students don't have to go under those cages or under the barge and hit those cages. Yeah, so that's just the way the field is set up this year. Every year is a little different when it comes to this alliance selection in terms of what kind of potential physical barriers there are, but that's my intention. That's I think what we'll do. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, does the assigned team get the opportunity to accept or decline?
Boy, that's a really good question. They certainly could decline, which means they can't be selected by any other team. And since
unless you're early in the first round.
Unless you're early in the first round.
And it's the second.
Yeah.
The second, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah,
But you can't see that happening much, but
I don't see that happening much either, to be honest. Yeah. Good question, though. There are all these kind of scenarios that come up that you have to think about. What else?
But yeah, I could certainly see a team, being in the 8th spot, not making their pick, and then team 9 being wanting to know, do they get us? I mean, of course they would probably say yes, but
yeah,
to be prepared, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that the automatic assignment of a team is that very last pick in the round, so it doesn't happen earlier in the round. If you're a team that doesn't make a valid selection and you're skipped multiple times, or you have to be skipped. We go back to you. You make a selection. Of course, that team that's selected can accept or decline, particularly in that first round, right? That's typically when it happens. But I think that very last selection in that first round is where this automatic assignment comes into play. Any other questions about alliance selection here? Yeah, Dominic.
So let's say you're a higher ranked alliance, right? And you get skipped, and like it's not a full 45 seconds, right? If the next ranked alliance lead makes their pick in 15 seconds, right? You don't get the whole 45 seconds then to, come up with your pick, right? You have those 15 seconds then and are called back.
That's correct, right? If that alliance that picks before, if let's say it takes them 10 seconds to select, right? Which is fine. When we come back to you as a skipped alliance, you don't get the time remaining from that other alliance. You basically have to choose immediately. There's no timer essentially for that. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Max?
If multiple alliances get skipped, what is the order that they get? You go back to, so that when they get to choose again, and then what order do they get assigned teams?
So I think it's going to be the first team that was skipped. We'll come back to them first, and then so it's in the order at which they kind of aren't able to make that balanced selection.
All right.
I hope this doesn't happen at all, right? The objective is really to not have to worry about this. So that, including this automatic assignment of the highest ranked unpicked team at the end of that round. Really, the intent here is not to skip any alliance, any team. We don't want to do that. We really don't want to do that. So I think if you want to know kind of what this is like, try timing 45 seconds at a team meeting. It's actually a fair amount of time, and 90 seconds as well, right? In terms of if you wanted to actually map this out and sort of figure out how you would actually do this, try it out, see what 45 seconds feels like, and see if you feel like it's it's something that's comfortable for you and that you can do it. But I think it's going to be doable for most people. And in general, the second selection in the second round is where there's more discussion, right? Because you are trying to collaborate and discuss things with your alliance partner, trying to figure out who that third alliance member is going to be. And that's why you have this additional 45 seconds to make that selection. That's typically where we have seen teams taking a little bit more time to try and figure out who they'd like to invite. So, so the intent is not, my hope is that we never have to do this. We never have to skip a team. That's really not what we want to do at all, right? So, but I think again, as we do every year, I think the message is really to be prepared, right? To have your scouting data, to have your pick list, as it were, be ready to go, just have a good sense of what you would like to do during alliance selection, so that you can make the best picks that you can for your team. So just be prepared. Dominic.
I'm asking a bunch of questions, but you don't
happen
to know for the round 3 of selection at champs for the 4th team of the alliances, what time limit is there for that one? Would it still be the 90 seconds?
I believe it's still going to be 90 seconds. I haven't seen it in the game manual, but I would assume it's going to be 90 seconds, but I haven't seen it specifically stated in terms of what that will be at champs. But my guess would be 90 seconds. Yeah. So, any other questions? These are all great questions. I think the other thing just to remember, and we always kind of remind people about this as well, is like if you are in that 9 to 15 ranked position after the end of qualification matches, you should be ready to be an alliance captain. Because I think it's more than likely, certainly in that 9, 10, 11, 12 position, given the way that alliances are selected, you will probably be in a position where you will be an alliance captain by the time we get to you. So you also need to be prepared for that. And that's another thing that I think a lot of teams, particularly teams that haven't done this very often, get surprised, I think, when they find out all of a sudden they're an alliance captain and they don't have a pick list or they don't have, the data that they need to kind of figure out what they'd like to do. So hopefully having additional team representatives there, but also being prepared and ready to go will kind of help that situation work well. We completely understand that. I think everybody knows that this is a really stressful environment to put students in. There's a lot of pressure. Everybody's watching you. Everybody's waiting for you to make a selection. We completely understand that. It's really tough. And we want to do everything we can to make sure that you are feeling comfortable, that you have the information that you need, and that you have the time, essentially, to make the selection that you want to make. So that's really what we're trying to do. And that's really the intent of all of these changes in the process. So, so just kind of remember that as well. All right. Any other questions about alliance selection? Obviously, we can come back to this if you have more questions. But I thought I would move on to the championship and qualifying for championship. All right. So this year, 4 teams from each regional event will qualify for championship automatically. So that'll be the winning alliance captain and the first pick, the first impact award winner, and the engineering inspiration award winner, right? So those would be the 4 teams that automatically qualify from each regional event. There will no longer be a wild card. There will no longer be a priority wait list or a general wait list. First is going to move to what they call a regional advancement points model for every other team, right? And let me explain to you kind of what the intent of this is based on the task force that was put together and what this actually looks like. So the goal of this is really to kind of maintain a balance between robot performance and awards, to maintain a proportional split between regional events and district events, to not have any other kinds of additional layers to qualify for championship, to be able to develop a system where teams can qualify for championship throughout the season rather than waiting until the very end of this season, have equitable qualifying for teams that are competing at both early and late events, and to minimize the amount of luck that's involved in qualification, right? So based on modeling that they used, where they looked at prior seasons and prior years, they basically wanted to come up with a system where a first impact award winner would basically be guaranteed qualification to championships. And the target here was 95% qualification rate. The Engineering Inspiration Award, also, the target here was 70% qualification rate. So strongly correlated with qualification for championship. The winning alliance captain and the winning first pick would basically be guaranteed qualification, again, with a target of about 95% qualification rate. Minimizing the amount of luck involved in qualification, and then lowering the incentives to be like the 24th robot, which is the second pick of that first alliance, and raise the incentives to be the 3rd or the 6th robot or the first selection, right? So the idea here is that regional finalists and 3rd place captains and the first picks in alliances will qualify at a higher rate than a regional winning second pick, the 24th robot, essentially. Right, that's the idea. So this is the model, and if you are familiar with what happens in districts, this is essentially the district point model with some changes with regard to the points that are awarded for team awards, right? So you get points at an event for how well you do during the qualification rounds. Let me go back to that here. And I think this is like a 22 points maximum here, and then it's sort of a sliding scale based on where you rank in the qualification rounds. You get points for being an alliance captain. You get points for when you are selected to join an alliance, and then you get points for your performance in the playoff tournament, right? So all of these kind of go into the overall total number of points that you achieve during an event. And then you get points for awards that you win. And this is where the big difference is between this model and the district model. So 45 points for the First Impact Award, 28 points for the Engineering Inspiration Award, 8 points for the Rookie All-Star Award, 5 points each for all of the other judge team awards. So significantly more points, particularly for the First Impact Award and the Engineering Inspiration Award compared to the district points model. And then points are given for 2025 rookie teams, and points are also given for 2024 rookie teams, right? So, so this is the way this is done. There's a paper that kind of talks about how they looked at prior years to see how this model would work. But this is the point system that's going to be used this coming year, and the FRC will basically be transitioning completely over to this points model in 2026, right? So, so you can see there are a lot of points on the table for robot performance, and particularly in the qualification rounds. You know, you can get a lot of points if you rank highly in the qualification rounds, plus the fact if you rank highly and are an alliance captain, you get additional points, right? So I think there's a lot of emphasis here on sort of consistent robot performance, particularly during the qualification rounds, in terms of, you know, getting a high number of points for qualification, right? Okay, so if you are not one of the 4 teams that you know, that automatically qualify for championship this year, everybody else is going to get ranked together in the regional pool, and this is for all the teams that compete in all the regionals. It's not just the Minnesota regionals or the North Dakota regionals; it's all the regionals everywhere, and all those non-event qualifying teams are ranked in that pool, and it's again based on the points that you earned, and it's from your first 2 regional events, right? So. And then beginning after week 2, teams are invited to championship weekly from that regional pool based on where they rank. So for example, so the question here is week 2, maybe you haven't played 2 events after the end of week 2. Then you actually get what they call second event points using this formula, where the second event points equals 0.6 times the points you earned in that first event plus 14, right? And then once you have played a second event, those theoretical second event points go away and your actual second event points are included, right? So that's the plan as we understand it with regard to how you would advance the championship, right? And then there are likely to be some ties in terms of teams that have an identical number of points, and there is a tiebreaker criteria essentially set up here. First order is best playoff points at a single event, and the second is the highest qualification round seed or the draft order acceptance, and so on down to 7th when you have essentially random selection, right? So, so there'll be some tie-breaking criteria as well set up here. Okay, so the perceived advantages of this model is based on the fact that it kind of maps to all of the established goals and targets. If we use points, that ensures that qualification isn't tied to kind of all or nothing outcomes. The teams will be ranked based on consistent performances across multiple events. That was an important target as well. And this model allows for weekly qualification. There are no kind of complicated cutoff projections for the regional pool. And again, those numbers in terms of the number of points assigned for the different categories of performance can be changed in future years so that they can tweak spot allocations and adjust the point values. So if you want to learn more about this, it's kind of an interesting paper to kind of read. This PDF kind of has information about kind of what they did and how they modeled it, what the goals and targets were to come up with this model. So this coming season, 2025, essentially is a transitional year, right? We're retaining some of the old qualification standards, which is the 4 teams that qualify automatically. Everybody else gets put into this points system. Next year, the automatic qualifiers go away. So 2026 is all going to be based on the points. So there now is not going to be a linkage between qualifying for championship and necessarily winning a regional event, right? So it's all going to be based on how many points that you have and when you will kind of essentially qualify for champs, right? Okay. Yes. AE.
Hi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yoji, thanks for going through that. My question is this. So the points model allocates teams to Worlds at weeks 2, 4, and 6. So if you have an early event in week 1 and 2, you'll be able to compete for that first week 2 selection, and then you'll be able to compete again at week 4, and then you'd be able, and by compete, I mean you'll be in the pool, the regional points pool.
Yeah.
And so you have essentially you have 3 chances to be pulled from the points list. Whereas if you're a team who doesn't compete until week 5 or 6, you're stuck, right? You only get 1 chance. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So the latest that I have read, and please correct me if someone has different information, I thought they changed from every other week to every week after week 2. So I think the idea is actually to pull some teams for championship after every week. So starting with week 2. But you are correct that you're not in the pool until you compete at least one event. At least one event.
And
right?
and do you, so if you, whether it's 1 week or 2 week, I still thought it was biweekly, but I could very well be wrong. But once you've been in the pool and had your chance at being picked, I'm assuming you stay in the pool and continue to be in the pool, and perhaps you have your second events and your automatic score is replaced by your actual second event score, but you continue to be eligible for the point selection throughout the entirety of the 6 weeks. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding. Yes, that is my understanding. Yep, absolutely.
So really this favors teams that get early slots in some ways.
Well, it's unclear to me kind of exactly how many teams are going to pull each week or every other week. So, I certainly don't think they're going to pull everybody who's going to qualify for championships after week 2 or week 3. They're really trying to space this out so that every team has an equal opportunity to be chosen, essentially, to qualify for championship. So I'm not sure actually how many teams are going to get selected at each of these kind of places where they're going to pull teams out for a championship. That isn't clear to me. We'll see. Dominic, do you have any other information, or maybe you know more than I do about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think also to just add on to what you were saying, at least how I sort of see it is that it's honestly pretty unlikely that if you compete in week 1 or like if you compete in week 1 and week 3, it's unlikely that you're going to qualify in the week 6 poll if you didn't qualify in the week 4 poll. Because I think at least from the models that I've seen, the point threshold is going to be the lowest probably at week 2 and increase across the other polls. And so it's unlikely that if you compete early that you would actually qualify more than like 2 weeks after you compete. But I was wondering beyond that, whether, like, let's say you compete once and you do really well at your first regional, and then for some reason you completely bomb your second regional. Do you have to use the points from your second regional, or can you use the 60% of your first points plus 14 model?
I don't know the answer to that, Dominic. That's a good question. I would assume it would be the actual points from your second event, but I haven't seen that clarified, so I don't really know the answer to that. That's interesting. Yeah. Scott, do you have a question, comment?
No, sorry. I was going to take my hand down because Dominic basically said everything I said. I agree with you, Dominic. I think that because in the later weeks, you're almost always going to get in based on tiebreakers, and tiebreakers are going to be points in a lot of those scenarios. That I agree. If you don't get in on a week 1 competition by week 3, you're probably not going to get in later because the matches are going to score a lot more points.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know how many regional teams there are that will be in the pool with?
I'm sure that data's out there. I don't know the answer though. I'm not sure actually how many regional teams will be in the pool. That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. So there's a lot of, we're going to see how this works. I don't know what the point threshold will be from each of the polls and how many teams are kind of estimating that they'll pull in for a championship at each of those time points, but it isn't. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. So, Scott.
This may have been in the tiebreaker list and I didn't see it, but are you aware of or have there been any discussions on regional size? Because that's definitely has always been a pain point for Minnesota with their super mega huge regionals.
Yeah. So I think that the only place I've seen this is this statement in the model, which is for events of all sizes, a maximum of 22 points will be awarded for the qualification round performance. And that's where I think the differential in points comes in, is primarily in those qualification matches, because the alliance select captains and their draft order acceptance playoff advancement is pretty consistent, right? It's consistent from event to event. So it's really this part of the model, I think, that by this. Although I guess you could argue that the team awards also might be, influenced by event size, right? In terms of the likelihood of receiving an award. So.
Yeah, when you're at a 60-team regional or 58 or whatever it ends up being, 10K always tends to balloon a little bit. The same thing with North Star. This year, I'm sure they'll have their target threshold, and then you'll end up adding a few more teams just because you have to. It truly is a big disadvantage when you're up against a 32-team regional and just about everybody gets in the playoffs.
Yeah. So, we're gonna have to see how this works and kind of how it works. I don't know if anybody's done the modeling. I think one of the questions about this model, of course, is whether more Minnesota teams will qualify for championship under this model than in the current system that we've used in prior years. We could actually do that modeling and find out in previous years whether this would have made a difference or not. But that's something to maybe think about. One thing that's pretty clear from the modeling that they've done in the paper or in that study is that fewer rookie teams are going to qualify for championship in this model. So based on kind of performance from prior years, it's a significantly lower percentage of rookie teams qualifying for champs. So that is going to be one difference, I think, with this model to just kind of be aware of. Yeah. Any other questions there? Okay, the only other slide I have is this one, which is about the State High School League. So the State High School League has basically decided that the qualifications for this year's championship event will be all based on points. So, they're going to maintain this practice where, all of the FIRST robotics teams in the state have been divided into 8 different regions. The top 2 teams from each of those regions qualify for championship or qualify for state. And then the next 20 teams based on points will qualify for championship, right? So again, there won't be polls at different weeks. It's basically at the end of the season when everybody has competed, basically the points will be tabulated and then the 36 teams will be invited to state. Dominic.
This is not related to the MSHSL championship qualification, but I'm just thinking about, I don't think any Minnesota teams do this, but thinking about teams that compete at 3 regionals, is it just the first 2 regionals that then count for points?
The document says first 2 regionals. First 2 regionals. Yep. So, yeah, that's another good question. Jeremiah.
So with the Minnesota State Championship, is that still the first regional, or is it still Are they going to follow the first model for the point system too?
They're going to follow the first model for the point system. So
performance
so if you do not compete, if you only compete at one regional event, you will get the additional second regional points by that formula.
So about 60% of that first regional.
Yeah, exactly. Plus 14. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Essentially. Yeah. I think that's one of the intended goals of the new points model is to not disadvantage teams that play only one event. So give them an opportunity to qualify for championship based on this model. So, and I think that is something that the state high school league has also struggled with regard to, in prior years, the points are only based on the very first event that you attended, because again, we had a lot of teams that don't compete at two events. So we'll see how this works with this new model for state. Yeah. Other questions, comments? I'm a little curious about how teams are kind of thinking about the points model in terms of strategy, robot design, even in terms of kind of trying to think about where they want to maximize their performance, or where they're kind of focusing or prioritizing performance based on potentially this difference in qualification for both state and for championship. I don't know if any teams have thought about that or not. Dominic?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this earlier, but sort of the higher emphasis on, ranking high.
Yeah.
I think, and especially with the change to have 6 ranking points, right, per match, has really sort of thought into the idea of, the importance of ranking points for us, and thinking about, how are we sort of making sure that we can get those ranking points, designing our robot to be able to do the deep climb, hopefully having programmers who are able to help out other teams and make sure they have at least a drive forward auto, right, to get that auto ranking point, thinking about sort of how can we get those ranking points. And I think that the point system allows for a higher emphasis on ranking points, which I think will be interesting to see.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, good point. Yeah. There's a comment in the chat from Tom. Yeah, Minnesota team's going to 3 regionals. I think there's one at least. I think 4607 is going to 3 regionals this year, but I don't know of any others, to be honest.
From my knowledge, Rebel Alliance from Owatonna is also going to 3, Colorado, Iowa, and North Star.
Oh, interesting. Good.
But that's only looking at their Blue Alliance. I don't know anyone on the team.
Yeah, I think 4607 is also based on just the information in Blue Alliance. Yeah. So. Yeah. Okay. If there's no other comments on this, I think I don't know if there are any comments about scouting. I think that's the other place where, to kind of make this alliance selection work well and for everyone to have a good event experience, kind of how teams are kind of approaching scouting and kind of helping other teams with scouting, because it's really that information that's really critical for teams to be ready and prepared for alliance selection. I have to say, when I've done alliance selection, I always get worried when a team representative shows up with absolutely nothing. Like there's no piece of paper, there's no phone out, there's no laptop, and they look frightened, and they look really worried and nervous. And again, that's just teams. A lot of teams don't have the manpower or the person power to kind of do the kind of scouting that other teams do, or don't have that information, or just aren't getting kind of help or assistance from other teams. So, so just again, something to kind of kind of be aware of. I think it's in everybody's best interest to have teams fully prepared, ready to go, and capable of selecting the very best alliance partners, right? So, Dominic.
Yeah, I know at least something I've been thinking of is sort of the, especially since here on 2491 No Mythic, we do a scouting alliance, thinking about whether, like, how teams are contributing to that, and thinking about at Northern Lights and 10,000 Lakes. I mean, personally, I've been thinking about this, whether, we provide our data visualization Google Sheet more public to the entire regional to allow for that data to be accessed by any team that wants to. I think I saw last year either Talon or Rogue like had their raw data accessible, and I know DataBits does some like sort of basic like data like stats for all of the different teams at regionals. And so thinking about how can you make sort of your scouting data public at regionals and allow teams to use that even if they didn't necessarily scout with you, I think is an interesting idea.
Yeah.
And thinking about open source like scouting and data.
Yeah. Dominic, I think No Mythic is one of several teams that kind of collaborate with other teams to generate the scouting data, right? That's the other place where there can be some partnerships and collaboration involved, right? In addition to sharing the data that you generate.
I know that several of the NMRC teams are collaborating on doing our scouting at Lake Superior and Great Northern too, since we have small teams, 5, 6 kids. And so we each take collective groups there too. We've done that for 4 years now, at least, and it's been very helpful for us.
Good. Yep. Other questions, comments? Doesn't have to be about alliance selection or points model, but Chris.
Just thinking more about this scouting alliance. It's kind of a new concept to me. Wondering how is that planned?
Yeah, good question. So Dominic or Natasha, you could talk about how the two of you kind of do that.
Yeah, I can talk at least for how we do it. We mostly do it with teams that we know pretty well, and especially that our mentors know other mentors on. But I think that we typically invite teams right after kickoff, and then for the past year, and then this year we've actually done like a first draft of our scouting system, and like teams can provide feedback on it, but it's pretty much just our team that makes the scouting system, does all of the data processing in Google Sheets, and then we're like, hey, we want your feedback. And some teams provide feedback and some teams don't, but then right before our regionals we do sort of a training session where we invite all of the teams to come to our shop, and we watch some like practice matches, and we sort of go through, here's how the system works, here's what all the different data points mean, and go through the Google Sheet, just so that everyone knows what's happening. And then once we're at the regional, we have different teams take different numbers of scouting seats in the stands. And so, you have smaller teams that might only be able to provide one student at a time, but throughout the entire regional, that one seat is filled by a team member of that team. Or the larger teams might contribute 2 or 3 scouts. And so you always can plan for your team, right? Like we can say, all right, we always need 2 scouts from no mythic. Let's, schedule person A and person B, and then let's rotate them out for person C and person D. And so able to sort of make sure that each team has the number of scouts provided so that we actually have all of the robots scouted. And then Thursday morning, before practice matches actually start, we have the entire alliance come together to again just go through the scouting system again, make sure that everyone knows what's happening, and then also to be able to exchange contact information for the scouting leads, thinking about phone numbers and whatnot, to be able to make sure that everyone has what they need to succeed and everything.
Yeah, it's basically like that. So each team is assigned, like if you're doing always scouting red 1 or blue 1, and then you put kids into those seats, and we always do make kids watch 10 matches at a time, and then they're given time off. So each team submits how many kids they have. Somebody creates a schedule, and then, we do all our practice during the practice matches. Everybody sits down and practice scouts those matches. We use the FIRES system that's out there. And so I don't know if any other teams use that, but I don't deal with that because it's not my thing. But we work with that person, and then they plug in all the data from the regionals, like all the teams that'll be there. So when you go in to your, we use just like tablets, you plug in, okay, I'm scouting blue 1, and then you start collecting the data during the match, and then it saves. And then afterwards you go into the FIRE system, and then you can pull up all the data from every match and then work with that to make that work. And then we also sit together sometimes afterwards and then decide like how things are going and explain to each other, where the teams are sitting, what would be good picks for depending on what you're looking for, and kind of go over the data afterwards too.
Yeah, one thing I also didn't mention is that at least for us, we like to have the teams that we're scouting with sit in the stands together. And so often you have, you're allocating seats for multiple teams, which can mean you have a huge section in the stands, especially at local competitions. But then we coordinate with the other teams saying, all right, at the beginning of the day when the doors open, make sure that we get enough stands space for all of the different teams, and making sure that we have a good spot for all of our scouts to be together. Although this year, I think we might split up our red scouts from our blue scouts, given how the field is laid out, as that would make it easier to look, especially with like the barge and the processor. We'll see.
Thank you for all that information.
I will just say to Dominic publicly, thank you for inviting us to be part of the Scouting Alliance. It's greatly benefited 3926 over the last year and before. So we've been glad to be a part of it.
Good. A, your hand was raised.
Yeah, I had a question going back to the regional qualification, so I don't want to cut off people who still want to talk about scouting if there's still some questions there.
We can always come back to it, so no worries.
Okay. I was wondering, with the new model, I know they did some retroactive look at the data to see, what percentage of teams would qualify using 2023 data and 2024 data. I'm wondering if you have any insider knowledge from, or not insider knowledge of how it would have affected Minnesota teams in particular qualification.
Yeah, I personally don't have that knowledge. I'm sure somebody has probably taken a look at it. I don't really know what the impact would have been. So I personally don't have that information and haven't actually gone to the trouble of trying to calculate all the different points models and looking back at last year or the year before. But so I don't have that answer. I don't know if anybody else on the call does, but that I don't have that information. Yeah.
I believe in the mentors have a Slack for Minnesota, and I believe John Schmidt posted a whole lot of data about that, pulling off the API. And I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I feel like the results were almost identical and slightly better in the new point system. So the point system would have been pretty much everybody who went before would have gone again, and a few more would have qualified. Don't quote me so much on that last one. So I don't think anyone that qualified before wouldn't have qualified under the new model. I think that was the big takeaway here, is that you wouldn't have lost your spot under the new model. I believe that was the outcome. I don't know that I'm not 100% sure it actually dramatically increased our representation at champs because we have such big regionals, and this point system doesn't really take into account the big regionals. But again, it's been quite some time since I saw that data, so I don't remember everything about it.
I mean, obviously, I think they're going to take a really hard look at how this works this year. And again, as was kind of stated, I think one of the things they wanted inherent in this model was some flexibility to kind of change things if needed. So I'm sure they're going to take a look at kind of how this impacts qualification from teams that are competing in regionals, and potentially make some changes based on what the experience is this year. But I think it is just important to remember that this year there are 4 automatic qualifiers for championships from each regional event. So that, as there has been in prior years. So. Any other questions? If not, Scott, I just maybe open it up for other things that people want to talk about, or.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, we've got 15-ish, 20 minutes left to go in our talk here. Hey, how about this? Let's first give a round of applause to Yoji. Thank you very much for leading this conversation. Super important information. And I want to give a special shout out too for the students on the call who are asking questions. I know last week mentors were almost exclusively asking bumper questions. This week, this impact is especially the students on the field, really important. Great questions and feedback from Dominic about scouting as well. So thank you to the students. I think if anyone has any kind of questions, something they're struggling with, something they can't find, anybody looking for advice, or what you want to share, something they learned or success I had this week, please feel free to pop in and let's start a new thread of discussion here this last 15 minutes or so. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Not a success story. It's more of a, do anyone know? I went on Andy Mark. If you want a wheel that is 3-inch or 2 2/4 inch or Star Wheels, you are out of luck. Is there any other vendor that will sell any of those compliant wheels? Anything that's 3-inch diameter?
Are you specifically looking for the green 35A durometer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, Rev has 40A. But I don't. They don't have the 35. Rev only sells 40A.
Yeah.
How about ThriftyBot? Do they have compliant wheels?
Oh, I didn't check that.
I think they're 30A. Don't quote me on that, but I think they're a little bit less. If you want like the green, from my understanding, is Andy Mark is the only place. ThriftyBot sells a little softer. Rev sells a little harder, but not.
I
could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But
I'm gonna go check now. Thanks.
We might be able to help you out with some Star Wheels. We bought a bundle of Star Wheels years ago. I'm not confident on how well they're going to work for you, but if you feel like Star Wars are going to help you, we might be able to send you some.
Thank you. I'll text you later.
Okay.
Material purchasing this year has been a challenge. We had a huge challenge getting 2x1 earlier this year for our elevator. Like it was a mad dash. It felt like to buy elevator bearing blocks and 2x1. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but it's been a challenge for sure.
Go ahead, Dr. B. You guys just pop in. If there's a lull, you don't have to wait for me to call on you.
Yeah, Scott, I just want to say thank you for the tip about Lowe's having the polycarbonate on sale. Because there, honestly, in Rochester, there was like 2 sheets available, but in Owatonna, they had like 20, and we got them all. That was amazing. To get 0.118 polycarbonate at 90% off is crazy. So if anybody needs some, we have 25 sheets. That's an amazing deal. That was the best tip from last week, other than the other discussion, honestly. But 90% off is crazy.
What are you talking about?
So Lowe's, the home improvement store Lowe's, they're closing out their polycarb. It seems like they're not going to carry anymore. So a 4x8 sheet was normally $220 and on sale for $19. So but it's only 0.1. So it's 1/8 inch. So it's really thin. It works great if you need to bend something like for a hopper or something like that. But polycarb is polycarb. I mean, even thin polycarb, you can find a use for it. We ended up wiping out the Coon Rapids Fire Bears. They had 32 sheets. Fire Bears took 20, and we took the last 12. So yeah, I was gonna order it, and then I thought, well, I'll do it in the morning because I got to go to the meeting. And then someone at the meeting checks and said there's only 12 left, and then it turns out the Fire Bears took the first 20.
That's funny. There was 35 there when I placed my order for it online.
Yeah, I think they probably are wondering what in the world's going on with this. Now everybody wants it once you put it on sale. And
it's not in stock anymore, but everybody wants it. What's the deal?
Yeah,
honestly,
maybe we should
that's a great deal. But if anybody
again.
wants to share, we're happy to share, because honestly, I don't think it'll take us maybe 10 years to use that much polycarbonate, but it's really good. Little shields, little brackets, little whatever. Totally great.
Well, we burned up a lot of ours on the week 0 field. So our week 0 field got all new plastic for the driver stations and lots of things like that. So we probably wouldn't have bought as much as we bought, except for we knew that we could use half of it immediately on the week 0 field, because we're taping the cracks and things like that, because plastic is so expensive in big sheets.
We're 25-30.
Yeah, we were talking to we were trying to find some, or find a deal. So we were talking to sponsors, and they were saying like, "Oh, we'll settle you for 100." And my brother is the booster president for our team, and he was like, "Well, let's just check some of the home improvement stores." So we checked Lowe's, and then that's where it started.
I have a question especially if there's students still on the call that want to chat. I'm curious where students are at with their autonomous. So our team is starting to do some auto stuff, and we're trying to figure out how to adjust for the fact that the reef is most likely going to move a lot on the field, and it's not going to be in the place that it starts in the beginning of the match compared to the end of the tournament. So I'm just curious if teams are developing strategies around dealing with that. And again, the Sunday night call, we really want a lot of student and mentor participation, and the mentors are doing a lot of talking. So students, if you have something you want to share, please pop in.
Yeah, I mean, we were on HCPA on Wednesday, first robot there. And so that was super exciting for us. I mean, we were just a drivetrain, but and I think our climber prototype. But I mean, I think using our odometry worked really well on the field. There's nothing to mess it up. No cable protector from 2023. And so we're super confident in our odometry. And we're going to still be using, the April tags, and we're using the distance sensors to line up with the reef. And so I'm not a programmer, but I haven't sensed any worry about the reef moving throughout the competition.
That's true. You guys are using those distance sensors, which probably will give you an advantage. Trevor asked in the question, the reef can move. So I'm basing this experience based on Steamworks. So what year was Steamworks? Was that 2017? Steamworks, if you aren't familiar with the game, go back and watch the videos. It had this gigantic airship, 2 of them, 1 on each end, and there were 2 students standing on top of it. This thing weighed hundreds of pounds, plus you put it probably another 150 to 200 pounds of students on top of it. And that thing, we were constantly now back then we didn't have April tags, but we were constantly adjusting our paths to get to the new place where we needed to score our gears, because as robots were running into the airship trying to get their gears placed on the pegs, eventually, that would kind of move across the carpet a little bit. So yes, the things in the field can move, and they do move. We saw last year students or robots running into the loading station, and the loading stations, the fields are getting out of skew and things. So we're trying to think ahead for how we can deal with the fact that our paths, that our approach is that we need our paths to get us close enough so that our cameras can take over, and we can put if you're using what is it called? It's not called what's the thing that estimates? Pose estimator. Is that what it is? Pose estimator. If you're using pose, I'm doing mostly CAD stuff now, and I've lost all my programming chops. If you're using the April tags to update your position on the field, whatever that thing is called now, you can weight how important the camera is to updating your position. And so we're trying to figure out how we're going to weight that camera feed to update our position so that we can drive up towards the reef, and it'll think that the reef is where it is, and in fact it's 3 inches this way and maybe 2 inches that way, and you'll put more weight on the camera so that your robot says, oh, I'm actually in this spot on the field relative to the reef, and then it can drive up to the reef. So I don't know. Well, we still haven't worked through all the problems yet. I'm just curious to know if anyone else is working on it.
We've been struggling a lot. Sorry, go Jim. Sorry.
Just a quick question, Scott, or others. In 2017, was that particular field element, were they using Velcro to the carpet at that point in time like they are now? I mean, I'm in tearing the field down and stuff. I was surprised taking fields apart how well those pillars last year, how well they stuck to the carpet. So I was just thinking that the reef would be Velcro down well. I just, don't know. Guess I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I'm almost certain there was Velcro on the ship in 2017, and yeah, I think everything has Velcro on it. The walls have Velcro on them. Everything has Velcro on the bottom of them. But a heavy robot running at speed, you hit it enough times, it's going to slide a little bit, I think. Or the carpet might stretch. I mean, again, I'm not thinking it's going to move a foot. I'm thinking it might only move a couple of inches. But when you're reef pipe, you can only miss that reef pipe by about an inch.
Yeah, you get a real small margin. So yes.
Yeah, real small margin. So even that reef moving 2 inches or 3 inches could make a big difference.
Speaking of programming, we've been having quite a few issues with the Rev library. Our programming mentor and students keep talking about how they rewrote all the Rev stuff. I'm not an expert. Right before kickoff, so we've just been struggling because we have to kind of relearn everything we thought we knew the last 2 years. So I don't know if other teams have experienced that or not, but that's been a huge pinch point for us. Finding encoders, finding the swerve stuff, the Yagsel, yeah. So it stinks, but we're working through it. But it's just tough. We're using an alternate encoder for our elevator to know the PID. I feel like I'm speaking a different language that I don't know. Anyway, but we're all this to say today, someone posted in Discord and said there's one mention that on the alternate encoder you have to have it on the A mode instead of the S because of the way they rewrote it this year. And anywhere else on the internet it exists except for this one sentence in a 20+ page document. Anyway, so that's the type of thing that we've been struggling with, at least programming wise. So I see Tanya is also struggling. So I feel your pain.
I will share that last year we were using Krakens for drive motors and Neos for steer motors. So that put us in the base WPI lib swerve, which has always been trouble for us and a lot of other teams to use that raw WPI lib library. And then we wanted to use last year's robot for driver practice in the driver testing for how we select our drive team. And it took us 2 weeks to figure out how to update the code to the 2025 because the things that had changed and some of the configuration stuff that we had to do, and we were getting errors thrown in weird spots, and it took us several meetings. I think it was maybe 5 meetings to take code that was working just fine and make it work again with the updates. I think this has always been a huge weakness for FIRST with maintaining consistency, backwards compatibility. I mean, these are things that have always hurt programming teams and doesn't really get enough attention, especially with late changes, right? Something that ran just fine in December now doesn't work in January. That's a problem, right? You can't train your kids on how to write code and then it doesn't work, because especially for new programmers, that's a nail in the coffin of a kid who's excited about code when things like that happen. But we are using, I will say on our competition bot this year, we're using the CTRE libraries. I haven't seen any of that code at all, but I know that our programming captain had it working very quickly. He was very happy with it. So we're using a full CTRE stack now, hardware and software, and he's very happy with it. So that's good. I mean, that's positive. It's unfortunate that you have to use a vendor library to get that kind of success. I mean, it would be nice if you could just use the raw WPI lib and be able to get that kind of success. But I get it. I mean, it needs to be generic, and the documentation is hard. People don't like to write documentation anymore or build samples. So it's hard.
But, yeah, I guess I wonder how much that's going to change with the new control system next year that they announced a couple months ago, right? I think, isn't it that FTC and FRC are going to be using similar control systems and electronics now or something like that? So
yeah, that's my understanding as well, is that there'll be a lot of shared components. I don't know that there'll be, I mean, the FTC for the most part, and I coached FTC for probably 4 or 5 years. Our code was so much simpler to do for FTC. So I don't know if the impact will be comparable. I just don't know.
So I was talking with Corey Applegate, I think it was yesterday, because he runs the field for NMRC during our week zeros and NMRC events, and he sounded a little bit apprehensive about the new radio and how that will work out at week zeros. And so his backup plan is, well, if that's the case, everything run your robot from your computer. So I don't know if that's something other week zeros are anticipating with the new radio, or I don't know.
That's a good point. I haven't heard any discussions about that. I will ask Brian Herbst, who's at FTA. He'll be running our week zero. I'll check with him on Monday. That's a really good point.
Not sort of keeping on the autonomous track. I know we only just a couple minutes. The team update 8, basically, from our understanding of it, is that running autos on the practice field is going to be discouraged, or at least long autos. I don't know what that means exactly. But we spent about we ran our auto on the Duluth practice field because we were right across the alley from it. We probably ran it 100 times, it felt like. So we're definitely conscious of trying to get our autos as close as possible before Duluth. Yeah. Where else can you practice it? At your school or one of the practice fields somewhere in Minnesota? I'm not frustrated. I get it. I almost got bowled over by robots a bunch of times at Duluth last year, but I get the safety component, but it's tough.
I think I read that too. And my takeaway from that was first wants people to expect that you can't run autos on a practice field. I think that I believe in that rule setup. They explicitly stated that the field would be set up in such a way that, they did not say this. This is my takeaway. You would not be able to run an auto that could score on the reef and then also get element from the human player station. The way that they worded it made it seem like they explicitly set up the field elements so you would not be able to run that type of an auto. Why? I'm guessing it's because they don't want to provide a half a field for the practice field. And so because they're only going to provide one piece of carpet, they want to kind of discourage you from trying to use it for autos. They did say in there that you are not allowed to move the field elements. So if you wanted to say, hey, let's put this here and we put that there and then we can test our auto, you are not allowed to move the field elements. Now in Duluth, ARC sets up the practice field in Duluth and they set up their entire practice field last year. So given assuming that that's going to be the situation again, this probably doesn't apply. But if we're using a first supplied practice field, I think we should expect that we will not be able to practice autos on the practice field. That's a great comment. I saw that update too.
Quick question. Anybody get Limelight 4s and what are they seeing with them? Crickets, huh?
You might be the first one, Jim, that I've heard who has a Limelight 4. I know that I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. We talked a lot about everybody's running an orange. Well, not everybody. A lot of people are running an Orange Pi with lots of cameras, photon vision. But I don't. Yeah, you might be the first one that's brought up the new Limelights. What are you seeing with them?
I'm out of my element. My son's off to college, but we shipped him one just so that he could play with it. And FaceTiming today, and he did a lot of our programming last year for 2530, and I was impressed with what I was seeing. He's extremely impressed from the 3 and the 3 Plus that he was working with over winter break. I think it was well in excess of 100 frames per second that he was seeing, and the lock on was, and he was showing us on his computer the pose and in the simulation, and it was absolutely rock solid. So don't know. I just was curious what anybody else was seeing.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so we had a lot of success when we were testing out our Limelight 4s. Very high frame rate, and I was testing with bending April tags around a little bit, and that was working very well as well. So it was capturing, I put down highest resolution and is capturing roughly 50 FPS, but I was getting well above 100 with a slightly lowered resolution, and that was really accurate tracking. And the programming is pretty similar to working with Limelight 3s, so that was really nice.
Yeah, that's the same thing that Colton was showing us too, almost exactly, James.
Yep.
All right, it's 8:30. Any last minute comments? All right, we are not meeting next week. There's a football game on. So we are not meeting next week. And then we will return the week after that. I don't remember what's on the docket. It might be autonomous programming the hard way. The manual way gives you more control way. Hard way is probably, Foamy will be upset that I said that. So we're going to talk about doing code construction of your autonomous. I think that is the following week, or it's going to be the week after that. Anyway, when we return, we've got a couple of more sessions lined up, but we don't have anything lined up for March yet, I don't believe. So if anyone is interested in giving us a chat, leading a discussion, giving a presentation. We have a lot of open slots after February. So we'd love to have you guys on. And once again, thank you very much to Yoji for coming on and leading this discussion. There were several things that I learned, and I thought I knew everything about the new alliance selection rules. So that was great, really good. And I hope everyone takes this back to your teams and shares with your strategy group. Okay, Olivia, no, we do not have a meeting next Sunday. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Have a good night.